Following Hurricane Katrina, as the floodwaters rose from the breached levees, residents were forced to climb to the rooftops of their homes to wait for help. One of these was a very religious man who prayed for God to save him. Since he was a man of faith and prayer, he was confident God would save his life. Sitting on his roof as the floodwaters rose, there came a man in a small rowboat who offered him a ride. But the rowboat looked precarious in the swirling floodwaters. So the man on the rooftop said, "No, thank you. I've prayed to God, and God will certainly save me because he's a faithful God." Soon after, a Coast Guard helicopter flew over, and the pilot, seeing the man on the rooftop, dropped a ladder, but the man refused. "I'm not going to take the risk of climbing that ladder," he said to himself. "It looks too dangerous." So he waved it away and prayed all the more to God to rescue him from the rising waters. Soon a life raft appeared, but it was bobbing up and down, and the current looked strong, and the life raft looked oh so flimsy. So the man on the rooftop did not get in while he could, and soon the current had taken the lifeboat away. Then the floodwaters overwhelmed him, and the man drowned. When he got to the pearly gates, he said to God, "Lord, I prayed 3 times. Where were you?" "Where was I?" said the Lord. "Where was I? In the rowboat, the helicopter, and the life raft. Didn't you recognize me?" Well, I dare say we've all heard that story in one form or another, but it still has relevance. Think about what Philip said to Jesus in today's gospel. "Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied." And Jesus said to him, "Show us the Father? Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me?" Day after day, Philip had been with Jesus, had been with God, saturated Jesus. Day after day, there had been sign after sign of the presence and action of God. The sign of God's presence is Jesus turned tasteless water into rich red wine. As Jesus healed the son of an important royal official, as Jesus healed the paralytic man by the pool at Bethesda, as Jesus fed the 5,000 with a little bit of bread and fish, as Jesus healed a man blind from birth, as Jesus resuscitated Lazarus from the dead, as Jesus told the woman at the well everything about her life, as Jesus did not condemn the woman caught in adultery like any other self-respecting, good religious Jewish man at the time would have done, like the crowd of Midnid who were ready to stone her. And in the chapter before today's gospel, as he tenderly washed the disciples' feet like a mother washes the feet of a child, and tells them to show love to one another as he has shown love to them. What more could Philip want? He's been in the presence of God all this time, been witness to the tremendous grace and love of God at work. There are signs galore that God is there, and signs galore of who God is and what God is about. And yet, like the man on the rooftop, he swishes them away, he dismisses them, he rejects them, and asks Jesus to show him the one who has been with him all the time. Well, guess what? Philip is us. Certainly is me. John wants us to see ourselves in Philip. Like Philip, like the drowning man on the rooftop, signs of God's presence and love and concern for us are all around us. Signs of God there for us every day. You have already seen signs of God's presence in your life before you even walked into this church whether you knew it or not. Look for the signs, says John. Look for the signs. They are all around you. And John's gospel is all about the signs that point to another reality that is embracing us, saving us, holding us up, and loving us. Look for the signs, Win Lewis. Look for the signs, Christ in St. Luke's. Yesterday morning, 60 persons gathered in Lloyd Hall for breakfast with Bishop J. Magnus, assisting bishop of this diocese, before being baptized or confirmed or received or making a renewal of their faith. Some were from other parishes, Eastern Shore Chapel, St. Andrew's, St. Peter's, St. Paul's, St. Thomas, but the vast majority of those people were from this parish. They were former Roman Catholics, Methodists, Baptists, non-denominationalists, and of no religious background. All had told Father Grant and me in one way or another that they had walked into this church and they knew they had come home. And so yesterday they were about becoming official members of this church and of the Episcopal Church. Early in the morning, as I rushed to set out the breakfast items before they got there, I walked in and saw that it had already been done. Blessed Kevin Kwan had picked up the bagels, set up the serving tables, put beautiful tablecloths on them, set everything out decoratively and welcomely, and it was all done. I walked into the church, the doors were open, the lights were on. David Roberts had gotten here at 6 a.m., our wonderful sexton, because he was afraid that there might be flooding from the rain. If you put on your business lenses, you might think this is good organizational teamwork. But seen through the eyes of faith, this is God's work of love and hospitality, a form of compassionate foot washing, a caring for one another, making sure that there is a welcome. It is easy to miss the Christ in this. It's easy to dismiss it as something else. And yet, if we put on our lenses of faith, we realize it's part of the miracle. It's a sign that God is present in our midst. It's a sign of the one who said, "Love one another in the same way that I have loved you." It is a sign of the presence of God. Friday evening, I was working at my desk when outside in the hall I could hear the voice of a man talking to Kevin Kwan. "Kevin, I think you're the star of this today." And I heard Kevin answering gently and quietly to him, and I could tell by the sound of the man's voice and the odor of stale alcohol that it was probably a drunk homeless man. I looked at my watch. I was behind in writing my sermon, and I was meeting Kathy for dinner soon. And I thought to myself, maybe if I just kind of stayed out of sight in the office, Kevin could deal with it and get the man out. So for a while I stayed holed up in my office trying to write my sermon, but it's funny about that, the words dried up at that moment. Words that had been flowing a little while earlier. Doggone it, I said to myself, why did Kevin let him in? I don't have time for this. But I couldn't abandon Kevin to face this guy alone. I could hear my wife's voice in my head saying to me, "And you do what for a living?" "You know I'm a drunk," the man said to us as he pulled off his shoe and sock to show us his horribly infected foot. It did not take a medical degree to see what looked like the telltale signs of a severe staph infection. "I was in the hospital," he said, "and had antibiotic pills, but they got stolen on the street while I was sleeping." Kevin and I said to him, you need to go to the hospital, to the emergency room. It was pouring rain outside. Come on, I said, I'll drive you. Kevin got him a hot cup of coffee to help sober him up, and he and I left. When we got to the hospital, he didn't want to get out of the car. He said, I'm just not ready to get out yet. Could we talk? He had sobered up a little bit. He said, I want some time with you. And so we talked for a bit, maybe about 15, 20 minutes. He told me about his life, about jail time, about his parents who were drunk most of the time. He wept some. Maybe it was helped by the alcohol. He then turned to me and he said, "You're a nice man." And I said, "You are too," as I felt affection rising within me. I said, you have a good soul," and I meant it. It came out spontaneously. And then we said goodbye, and he got out of the car and he went into the emergency room. Last night I had a text that he was back in church, drunk and belligerent, causing a scene during a concert, and the police had to be called. I thought, doggone it, I need to drop that story from my sermon. But this morning I thought better of it. Because you see, that did nothing to what I experienced and what I saw in him of his soul in the car. Because sitting in the car in the rainstorm outside of the emergency room, I knew that God was there in that moment behind the drunken haze in that man. And I was touched by it. I was the one touched by it. I don't know how he got touched, but I was the one who was touched by God in him. It's funny how we reject those cornerstones in our life. Every day this week, most of us went home to hear the evening news talk about fear, violence, and division in our world and country. At times it feels like God is far away. But then there are signs, oh, so simple signs, easily missed signs, signs that we might reject or dismiss as something else without the eyes of faith to see them. Signs that we are loved. Signs that the God of love is there for us. Signs of hope, so that we realize that the Lord of love has been with us all along, and the Lord of love will continue to walk with us in the future. Amen.